Good evening. Welcome to CCF Fellowship. I am grateful to God that today we are gathered here. Today my topic is the night Jesus was handed over. After last week we have seen that how Jesus struggled in the Garden of Gethsemane and how he has surrendered everything to God. So where Jesus had already resolved within himself in the Garden of Gethsemane to obey the will of the Father regardless of the cost. So whatever was settled in the prayer, now Jesus starts living out in reality. Jesus is already exhausted. His body has gone through intense strain. His heart has carried unbearable pressure. Then Judas arrives leading a crowd, temple guards, officials and others carrying swords and clubs, coming not as if they are approaching a teacher, but as if they are confronting a dangerous person or a dangerous threat or some kind of a terrorist. Judas steps forward and identifies Jesus with a kiss, fulfilling what has been spoken in the scriptures. In book of Psalm 41 verse 9 says that even my close friend in whom I trusted has lifted his heel against me. Turning an act of closeness becomes an act of betrayal, showing how sin can corrupt even the most closest person in the relationship, in our friendship, within the area of where we have good relationship with each other. We see how the sin corrupts it. There is a pain here that cannot be measured physically. Just imagine, he has been handed over to an enemy is one thing, and to be handed over by someone he loved, someone you taught, someone you trusted, it brings a deep pain. You feel as a heart has been cut. So this is what I believe Jesus has gone. No weapon has been used, but emotionally he has been cut down. Yet Jesus is not passive in confusion. He steps forward and asks whom they are seeking. And when he declares, I am he, they draw back and fall to the ground. As the book of John says, revealing that even in this moment, Jesus' authority is still intact. But instead of using the authority to escape, he yields himself, making it clear that he is not a loss of control, but deliberately he is surrendering himself. Now, as he is bound and led away, the scene already reflects another layer of prophecy, because Isaiah had written, he was oppressed and he was afflicted, yet he opened not his mouth, like a lamb that is led to the slaughter. Now this is not a sudden reaction. This is the path foretold, now unfolding step by step in front of the whole world. In the confusion that what follows, Peter reacts. But looking at the confusion, Peter reacts, and what he does, he draws his sword and strikes the ear of one of the servant of the high priest, and his name is Malchus. It is an unconscious attempt to protect, to resist, or to stop what is happening. But Jesus immediately comes in between, saying, no more of this. And then he heals the man. Malchus restores the very person who came to actually arrest him. This moment is very crucial because it reveals that even under pressure, Jesus is not governed by the reaction, but by the purpose he has come on this earth. While others move in fear or aggression, but he remains steady, committed to a path that does not rely on violence but on obedience. His kingdom will not be established by force, and even now, in the face of betrayal, he chooses restoration over retaliation. Then comes the quiet but devastation shift, and that is all the disciples, they leave him and run away. Matthew states in plainly. Then all the disciples left him and fled. These are not distant followers. These are the ones who walked with him daily, who heard his teaching, who declared their loyalty towards him. Yet, when the situation becomes dangerous, when the association becomes a real risk, what happens? They scatter. So this is not merely a failure of courage, it is actually an exposure of human weakness under the pressure which happens with each one of us. That's how it fulfills Zechariah chapter 13 verse 7. Strike the shepherd and the sheep will be scattered. Jesus, who poured out into them, now stands alone, bound and surrounded by enemies, without a single human voice in his defense. The isolation is complete, and yet he does not stop the process or call them back. He allows the loneliness, because the path he is walking is not the one anyone else can do it or someone else can share it. Jesus is the first taken to Annas, the former priest, to observe, to have some private examination before taking him to the Caiaphas, the acting high priest of that time, where the scribes and elders have gathered. Now here after that he has been brought to the Sanhedrin. The full council was present. This is the trial that Jesus was going through. But in reality, if you observe, it is a predetermined judgment. He is taken to the house of the high priest in the middle of the night, which already reveals the nature of what is happening. This is not a transparent pursuit of justice, but a controlled and secretive environment designed to secure an outcome they have already decided. According to the law, they claim to uphold. According to Deuteronomy chapter 19:15, requires that the matter has to be established by 2 or 3 consistent witnesses. But here the testimony has been brought against him, and these testimonies are not aligned with anything. So accusations were made, but they failed to form a proper solid case. And instead of stopping the process, the leaders pressed forward, showing that the truth is no longer their concern. Exodus chapter 23 verse 1 and 2, if you read, it warns against the false testimony and joining hands in justice. Yet here the leaders are united, not to protect righteousness, but to secure the condemnation of Jesus. In Deuteronomy chapter 16 verse 19, commands that justice must not be perverted or influenced by bias. Yet everything in this moment is driven by urgency and partiality. When the witnesses fail, Caiaphas steps forward by passing broken process and directly confronting Jesus under oath. He says that, tell us if you are the Christ, the Son of God. This is no longer an investigation anymore. It is coercion, a demand designed to force a statement that can be used against him. Jesus answers with lot of calm way. He says, you say that I am. And that single response becomes the whole turning point. Caiaphas tears his robes and declares blasphemy. In book of Leviticus chapter 21 verse 10 says that the high priest should never tear his garment. In fact, he should maintain this dignity. But by tearing it, the reaction shows that the Jesus is guilty. The reaction is not measured, not lawful, but emotional and immediate one. The council declares that he deserves death, not because the law has been upheld, but because it has been actually set aside. What follows is a complete collapse of justice. The one standing before them is no longer treated as someone to be examined, but as someone has to be humiliated, as the court turns into a place of mockery, violence, and rejection. The whole court turns around in different format. They spit on him, an act of deep insults taking place. They strike him, they blindfold him, they mock him, saying, "Prophesy to us, who hit you?" This is not a random violence, it is a deliberate degradation. They are not only inflicting pain, they are attempting to reduce him by stripping away his dignity, to turn the truth into a spectacle of making fun of it. Each blow lands on a body already weakened from the night. Each insult presses into the heart already carrying the weight of betrayal and abandonment. And yet Jesus does not respond in anger or defense. His silence is not the absence of power. It is actually the expression of control. He is not being overpowered. He is choosing not to resist. While this whole thing happening inside, there is another thing happening outside the courtyard. Peter does not run away like the others, but he also does not stand with Jesus. He follows at a distance. That phrase is not just physical, it is actually spiritual. It means that Peter still cares. He still wants to see what's happening, but he is no longer close enough to be identified with Jesus. This is where the compromise begins. Not in open denial first, but in distance. He enters the courtyard of the high priest, a dangerous place where someone associated with Jesus, for them, is a very dangerous place. The environment is hostile. Jesus is inside, accused and abused, while outside, Peter is surrounded by the people who are against Jesus Christ. So this is pressure. No, it's not a physical violence, but it's a social exposure. It can happen to us also in the coming days. And sometimes that is very hard. Okay, it is easier to face the danger than to face being identified. A servant girl notices him. This is important because she is not a soldier, she is not a ruler, she is just a servant. She says, "This man was also with him." That's all. No threat, no weapon, just recognition. And Peter immediately says, "Woman, I don't know him." The denial is quick, almost instinctively. Fear has already taken hold of him. Then comes the second accusation. Another person says, "You are also one of them." Now the pressure is building. People are noticing him. The circle around him is getting closed. Peter responds again, stronger than this time. "Man, I am not." You can see the progression. Okay, first denial is quick. Second denial is more firm. He is trying to protect himself. Just about an hour, the third accusation comes. Even more certain. "Certainly this man also was with him, for he too is a Galilean." Now his identity is being exposed. This is no longer casual. It is becoming undeniable by Peter. The Peter responds with more intensity. "Man, I do not know what you are talking about." The gospel tells that even Peter calls curses on himself. Matthew 26 verse 74 says that, "I swear I don't know him." This is the deepest level of denial, not just distancing from Jesus, but also disowning him. And then it happens. Immediately while he is still speaking, the rooster crows. Man, the sound of the rooster, I believe that might have cut him through everything. It is not just a noise, it is actually a reminder. Jesus had told him earlier, "Before the rooster crows today, you will deny me 3 times. In that moment, Peter realizes that is exactly what Jesus said would happen. The conference he had earlier I am ready to go with you both to prison and to death. It collapses instantly. And then comes the most powerful part. The Lord turned and looked at Peter. That's what Luke 22 verse 61 says. Think about it just for a minute. Jesus is inside being mocked, stuck, falsely accused. And in the middle of all chaos, he turns and looks at Peter. That means Jesus was aware that Peter was there whole time. Even while enduring his own suffering, he was not disconnected from Peter's struggle. That look is not described, but we can understand it by what it has produced in him. Jesus did not look with anger because Peter does not run in the fear of punishment. It is not even look of rejection because Peter does not give up completely. It is a look that carries truth and love together. That is why Peter breaks. He went out and wept bitterly. It says that I told you this would happen, and at the same time I have not given up on you. Peter, listen to me. So this is not a casual regret. This is deep, an internal collapse. The word bitterly suggests an intense grief. So he is not just sad, he is actually shattered. Why? Because he realizes two things. He has failed Jesus, and Jesus still loves him. That combination is what breaks a person. Not just failure, but failing someone who loves you completely. And when Jesus is being rejected publicly and Peter is breaking privately, inside Jesus is being stuck, mocked, condemned. Outside Peter is facing his own judgment, not from people, but from his own heart. Jesus is carrying the weight of the world, and Peter is collapsing under the weight of his own failure. As the night moves towards morning, the religious leaders formalize their decision. Having already determined the outcome, they now gather early to give the appearances of legality to what was decided in darkness. But they face a limitation. Under the Roman authority, they cannot carry out the death sentence. So some of the leaders who had hatred towards the Romans' rule, now they have to depend on the Romans to accomplish the goal. They take Jesus to the Roman governor called Pontius Pilate. They shift from the religious accusation of blasphemy to a political accusation that Jesus claims to be a king, and therefore it threatens Romans' authority. This shift reveals the extent of their determination. When truth does not serve their purpose, they reshape the accusation to secure the outcome they desire. Pilate examined Jesus and quickly recognized that the accusation lacked substances. He declares, I find no fault in this man. We should have resolved the matter. But the truth alone does not govern the situation. Pressure does. The leaders persist, intensifying the accusation and stirring the crowd. The situation begins to move beyond a legal inquiry and becomes a public demand. When Pilate learns that Jesus is from Galilee, he sends him to Herod, attempting to transfer responsibility and avoid making a decisive judgment. Jesus is then brought before Herod, now who receives not with hostility, but in the sound, not as the religious leader, but with lot of curiosity. Actually, Herod is very glad to see him, because not that he's seeking the truth, but he has heard about him a lot, and he was hoping that he will do some miracles. To Herod, Jesus is not at all a matter of justice or conviction. He is just a subject of interest, almost a spectacle. Herod questioned him at length, pressing him, likely urging him to demonstrate something extraordinary. But Jesus gives him no answer. The silence is deliberate. Jesus does not engage with those who reduce truth to entertainment. He speaks to those who are open to truth, but he does not perform for those who treat him out of curiosity. Okay, the chief priests and the scribes who were standing nearby continuously accusing the Jesus with lot of intensity to ensure that the agenda is not lost in the Herod's curiosity. But when Jesus refuses to respond, Herod's interest turns to collapse. Okay, and he gets disappointed that no miracle has been performed. So he and his soldiers begin to mock him. They dress him with a splendid robe as a form of a ridicule, sarcastically treating him as a king. The moment adds another dimension to his suffering. Not only is rejected and accused, but he is trivialized and mocked as insignificant. After this, Herod sends him back to Pilate without a verdict, returning the responsibility, allowing the process to continue. Herod and Pilate, before they were not in agreement with anything, but here at this point they were in agreement, and now they becomes a good friend. That's what the history says. When Jesus returns to Pilate, the situation has intensified. The crowd has grown more. The voices are louder and the demand is more forceful now. Pilate again declares that he finds no guilt worthy of death. Yet, instead of ending the matter, he attempts to negotiate with the public. He offers to release one prisoner according to custom, placing before the crowd a choice between Jesus and Barnabas, a man guilty of rebellion. Influenced by the leaders, the crowd chooses Barabbas. Okay, this moment is deeply revealing. Okay, the guilty is released. Okay, and the innocent is condemned. It is not a legally decision. It is a picture of actually substitution, where the one without guilt takes the place of the guilty. At this point, the situation moves fully into the hands of the crowd. Their voices rise together, not asking but demanding, "Crucify him, crucify him." The noise becomes overwhelming, the pressure relentless. Pilate stands at the center of this tension, knowing that Jesus is innocent, yet fearing the consequences of resisting the crowd. And he knows that justice and stability is colliding, and instead of standing on truth, he yields into the pressure. The decision is no longer about evidence. It is about maintaining control and avoiding the unrest. Through all of this, Jesus stands physically exhausted from the night, emotionally wounded by betrayal and denial, surrounded by hostility at every level. He has been abandoned by the disciples, condemned by the religious leaders, examined by the rulers, mocked by the soldiers, and demanded by the crowd. Every human support had collapsed, and yet he remains steady. He does not argue endlessly. He does not attempt escape. He does not resist the path before him. This is not because he is powerless, but because he has already chosen obedience. The surrender that began in the garden is now being carried through every moment. By the time the decision is finalized, everything is in the place. The innocent has been condemned, the crowd has spoken, and the system has aligned against Jesus Christ. This is not a sudden movement towards the cross. It is a step-by-step progression of rejection, injustice, and surrender. And just before the next phase begins, before the physical suffering intensifies even further, one truth stands clear. Jesus is not being forced into this path. He is walking it willingly, carrying forward the decision he made to obey the Father no matter the cost. When I look at this night, I cannot just point out at the crowd or the high priest or even the Peter. I have to ask where I am standing, because it is easy to say I would never betray him like Judas, or I never deny him like Peter. But the truth is, every time I choose distance over obedience or devotion, or silence over the truth, or comfort over obedience, I am not far from the same place. The night is not just about what they did to Jesus, it reveals what is in the human heart. And yet, what amazes me is this: Jesus knew all of this would happen. He knew Judas would betray him. He knew Peter would deny him. The leaders would condemn him and the crowd would reject him. And still he walked forward. He did not turn back. He did not change his path. He chose to go through it. So the question is not just what did they do to Jesus. The real question is, how will I respond to him? Will I follow at a distance? Will I stay silent when it matters? Or will I surrender like he did? Because he was rejected so that I could be accepted. And now the choice is mine, whether I will stand with him or step away. Thank you for being here. I believe this message is a blessing to all of you. Let us pray for the communion as we take part into it.